But I think that the thing about misogyny is that there's a cumulative impact of prejudice, and we talk about microaggressions, and I think that sometimes an action may not speak to hatred overtly, but it actually represents a deep-seated misunderstanding or suspicion, which can actually, I think, really, if you get to the root of it, is hatred. It can be something as small as the way that you describe a woman, or the standard, if a woman's in public life, she's shrill, she's bossy, she barks, or telling a woman to be quiet. That comes from a place of disrespect and hatred. So I do agree there are instances which on the face of it may seem very small, but what they add up to can, for me, question my right to speak and question my right to be a leader. And that's out of the belief that I'm not wanted. And I think part of that does come back to hatred. So yeah, I do see what you mean. There are instances where the word misogyny is just thrown almost as an end to a debate. And I really dislike that. It's a little bit like the word offended. You're offending me. It's like, okay, well, so what? You're offended. Let's talk through this. Let's not make this the end to a discussion. Let's take some learning from this offence. The same with misogyny. You can't just label a person as a misogynist and then throw out their entire discussion points, because that's not engaging with that person. It's not learning about that person and their perspective and its origins, and so therefore you are losing an opportunity, I think.
This is really interesting for me, this because what you're describing in terms of the way that a man typically would do something that could be described as misogynistic, it seems to me that very often actually that's coming from a place of fear. Fear, essentially, so that I see someone who's very talented, I feel threatened. I've been brought up in a way where I get my way, I can do what I think I need to, and here I am faced with a woman, and all of a sudden I lose a lot of my sense of self-confidence, and therefore I say things to put you down. But I'm not sure that comes from a place of hatred. I think it comes from a place of insecurity and fear. And so...
but do you hate those feelings? Do you dislike those feelings?
I'm not sure I want to own all of this myself.
No, of course. But what I mean, I agree with you, and I think what a lot of women rights campaigners forget is what they're asking is a tremendous ask. Right. We can't just sit here and pretend like. I do get a little bit frustrated with all my feminism. It has to be somehow framed as to, but guys benefit too. Frankly, they don't. They're giving up the lion's share. And that's really tough, but it's something which needs to be kind of thrown out there to discuss how, like, yes, okay, well, there is a return on investment if you diversify the workplace. But ultimately, to the person, the pioneers of male feminism, they are opening up what has been a system designed to serve them to now serve everyone. And that is an ask, but it, with all of these changes, change is an ask, but ultimately it progresses us as a species to be better able to coordinate and understand one another. So I do understand your perspective, but I would still say that the way that this fear, as we all know, fear is often expressed through violence and hatred. And a lot of that comes down to the fact that men haven't been brought up to understand how to, or even allowed, frankly, to express fear. The only way, I have many men in my life who are fundamentally afraid and they just say, I'm so angry. And I'm like, you're not, you're frightened. But men aren't allowed to kind of label those feelings in the same way or even actually identify them. So I see what you mean with that.
And of the challenges that we've been experiencing, which is going out to leaders, which are typically men, and asking them to engage with this conversation where at the superficial level, it is a loss. They can't see anything more than a loss. And so I was really struck by this talk that Joe Delahunty, the QC, gave the other day at Chesham College, and she said, women have moved on, and men haven't. It's like they've been left behind. So how do you bring them up to that sort of, can I call it a grown-up conversation where actually you're going to be giving up something, but actually you're going to be gaining more.
And it's so important that also we don't, in order to not be intimidating, women don't view the route of success and respect through assimilation. I don't, well, no, more just that we don't emulate men, so men are more comfortable with women in the workplace.
Yeah.
I really think that it works both ways. I really hope by incorporating change, fundamentally this is about change, we can't just, I know that it's more comfortable to make it kind of systematic desensitization where it's increments of change. So we'll have like token women who will still be kind of, well, look at me, I'm dressed like this and I have short hair and quite a deep voice, but ultimately it's that kind of incremental change. But we need to open up to this conversation and to encourage something really meaningful, and to allow men to see that by changing the status quo, the blueprint of success, then it means that it's actually giving them, it may not be the return on investment they expect, like financial or that growth that we're all obsessed with, but it may instead be allowing them the opportunity to question what gender means to them, to question how they express themselves, and I think that's incredibly worthwhile. It's going to take that shake up, which is very difficult to get shareholders behind, and that is, I think, why startup culture is so important. And I get really upset when startups report things like gender pay gaps and these working weeks, which are ridiculous, because it's like, you guys don't have the shareholders to appease, you know? You can really start exploring with what is optimal, and they're not.
But the model that they're using is the old model. That's what's really frustrating. You know, when you talk about disruptive organizations, and people always talking about Uber and Airbnb and organizations like that, and actually they're not disruptive. Well, they're disruptive in one sense because they've shaken up the industry that they're involved in, like Uber with the London taxis and so on.
Yeah, by cutting costs and treating humans appallingly. There's nothing progressive about what they do.
Exactly. Because all they've got is all these ants working really hard, and you've got a couple of people at the top making a whole bunch of money, which is the old model.
Yeah.
So
with even less regulation, I feel.
So I mean, I think we have to use this word disruptive quite carefully, because there's two levels, and in terms of the way the organisation is run, they're not disruptive at all. In fact, they're retrogressive. I think, because, and this is the whole exploration that we've been involved in with power, and exploring how power is expressed in organizations, because you get these young people, entrepreneurs, very successful because they're using the technology and they're using, I don't know, essentially it is, I think, technology very cleverly, but it loads so much power in such focused places. I think it's really, really scary.
I just wish these firms actually, it's funny, you have the Amazons, which talk so much about really caring for their customer, and Bezos in the end, and his annual reviews always talks about, you know, cherishing your customer. But the problem is we're cherishing our customer based on what we sell them is desirable. So it's like we're giving them what they want, but we've already sold them what they want since we've conditioned that in them. And actually, us being fundamentally unhappy with ourselves is very profitable, because if we liked ourselves, we wouldn't buy things. So I think the problem is that nothing is really going to change until, you know, disruption needs to go much more deep than how can we get our customers things faster and cheaper. I think true disruption is starting to coordinate human behaviour in a much more remarkable way.
And you know, there are organisations, and they're well discussed in Frederic Laloux's work, where he's looked at what organisations of the future look like, and and power is completely delegated, where HR departments don't exist because they don't need them, because if they need to hire someone or someone, it's the department that does it. The empowerment is just so delegated. And I think one of the really interesting things he says about all that is that if you want your organization, which already exists, to go the Teal Way, as they call it, the colour.
Oh, okay. I thought you meant the man. No.
Then one of the great challenges you're going to have is the board of directors, because they're going to have to let go of power. They're going to have to allow the leader, the managing director, or whatever, to take the company in a direction which is not going to be conventional in any way. And they get so scared. And he said it's much easier if you just start with a new company, and that's how it's going to be. And we talk about Patagonia. I love that company, and I love the way that they have just attracted people who fit. And you know, he's wrote that great book. Was it Let My People Go Surfing? You know, because it has life, it has soul. We've lost the soul in organisations.
I would go back a few steps to bring back maybe a bit more of you into the conversation, because we were talking about male mental health, and I know that is something that you have looked at and talked about in your TEDx talk. So mental health is a big topic at the moment. Anxiety is rising, mental health disorders in young people, mental health disorders in men. So I suppose from your work and your approach, what do you see as some kind of solutions to reaching out to more people, and especially men?
I think when we were talking about misogyny earlier, it's important to remember that misogyny is not just a male sport. Actually, women do perpetuate patriarchy, I think. And also, for me, in all my feminist writing, it's always kind of female focused, because women have not got the upper hand here, yet we kind of use it, we slap ourselves in the face with it sometimes, and intrasexual warfare is really rife, and also the fact that we make men's ability to kind of engage with us as equals more difficult by throwing things back in their face like man up, and really cementing what it is to be a man, and by virtue cementing what it is to be a woman. And I think with male mental health, it's so important that it's actually presented as well as a feminist issue, because if we have men who, as I said earlier, can only express discomfort, trauma through anger, then that's why is it we as women are so shocked about levels of violence against women accelerating. We need to be the ones actually championing this discussion, because I think as women who, be it we've gotten bad press with hysteria, and apparently, women are the ones who feel more, but because of that, we've been allowed to speak about it more. And women are now more literate. We actually have the advantage in terms of emotionality. I think we have the opportunity to talk about it with our sisters and sorority. I'm really grateful for the fact that I have very close female friends who I can talk about any anxiety with, whereas I don't think men have that. I think in fraternity there's still this pervasive toxic masculinity, which means men just don't have the opportunity to self-disclose, so they bottle up or they express it in a way which is either damaging to others or damaging to themselves, so either through violence or through self-harm, drinking, drugs to escape. So I do see the mental health crisis, particularly amongst men, is actually, as I say, it feeds back to a lot of the issues that women face. And ultimately, by differentiating between male mental health and female mental health, it means that we're not getting back to that fundamental understanding that we all share the same emotions. And it's a spectrum which we have differential access to. And that's a real problem, because that means we're not treating each other as humans who encounter the world and in often the very similar ways. And because of that, it's just having this huge divide and difference of who's allowed to feel and how they're allowed to feel. So in everything I do, I really want to ensure that it's women who are really spearheading this. Come on, guys, we need to actually come together. We're not accusing you of not being able to manage your emotions, but we need to actually be discussing about how people feel, not just how they act.
Definitely. Something else that I really wanted to talk to you about was in your TEDx talk, you talked about people come to Oxford and they fall apart, and that actually you put yourself back together when you arrived in Oxford. But in your kind of experience, what is it that, because I know other people have been to Oxford and they suffer quite high anxiety, and it's very high pressured, high expectation, high levels of success, academic environment. So what is happening within that culture, apart from the obvious, that is really creating that, and then does that go on to then become culture in future organisations that these people go on to work for? So actually we're talking about leadership in organisations, but actually within academia and education, it's starting there, right? These cultures are starting, and maybe it's even a heightened culture in a place like Oxford. So.
Yeah, it's definitely an incubator for toxic toxic leadership styles. I think what I found, and it goes back to this loss aversion, that I think Oxford has worked out. If you make people work out of this self-hate, work out of this belief, if they quantify their ego by, I got a first, I'm a number, but I'm a good number. And it's all about, if we give students this idea that they will only be worthy, they'll only be enough if they get this random number, which actually has no reflection of intrinsic value at all, but it's just bred that way within us. And these people are the people who get into Oxford tend to be incredibly ambitious, very perfectionistic, but normally have very low self-worth. They are driving themselves not out of passion for a subject, but kind of to approval, either of their parents or this invisible they, this belief that everyone's judging them and what they do is somehow more important, and it has to be better than everyone else. It's that mentality, which is, it's the chip on the shoulder that really accelerates success, but ultimately also accelerates self-destruction, I think. And at Oxford, what I found was, because I took the risk, and I said, no, I disagree. I think if I actually work less hard, then I'm going to be improving my resilience, but most importantly, looking after my mind, so my mind can, take this information and play with it and argue effectively, and come up with new ideas. And I was really what I wanted to kind of reiterate was the whole point of education is it's a total privilege, and it's a joy. It should be. And this is an environment that can be incredibly nurturing, but unfortunately the faculty want you to regurgitate what they've taught you, more or less, and they honestly want you to drive yourself out of a very self-flagellatory approach, rather than working for the joy of work, and pursuing your passions. It's about, I have to do this so I can get there, and then I'll be okay, then I'll be worth it, then I'll be happy, then I'll be enough. And I think that does follow through, but regrettably it actually means people do less well because they're just so burnt out. So the amount of 2-1s at Oxford is very impressive, but the amount of firsts is actually not too impressive, and that's because people have lost what it is to be an academic, and it's to inspire and create, make it new, Ezra Pound. Instead, we're just regurgitating because we're scared of being different, and that comes into to work, your working style of just bashing your head against a brick wall sometimes, this boxer from Animal Farm, I must work harder, and really thinking that output and success is determined by effort, when actually it kind of, the curve goes like that eventually once you push yourself off the cliff and burn out entirely, your output is nothing. So that is dangerous. And I do actually really like companies like Netflix, who they're quite good at basically saying, you work to your own timetable and we reward innovation. We don't just reward you doing your numbers. It's not that Taylorist Amazon style of these ridiculous lists which are longer than you could ever achieve just to keep you scared. I think that's the point. Oxford nurtures this idea of working out of fear and not out of love and commitment to your potential. So I got lucky because I think I burnt out very early and was like, wait, this is a lie. I'm not going to succeed if I don't like myself. I'm not going to succeed if I am exhausted and terrified all the time of not being enough, I'm just, you know what? Forget it. I'm just going to play. And as soon as I had that kind of openness to exploration and creativity, I just loved my subject again. And then I became a free thinker and a free speaker, and hopefully, you know, I'm kind of like in flux right now, but hopefully I bring that to my whatever organization I do represent. But yeah, I'm deeply saddened to see a lot of my friends kind of come out the other side of Oxford and I go, oh God, who am I? What am I doing? Like completely identityless, and just thinking, all right, I'll go to a logo job because then I matter. It's kind of like we're making ourselves prime beef and we just want more and more stamps to make us A grade. But ultimately, when we're alone at night, we don't really know who we are or have a sense of what we even like anymore. And that's really scary.
I was reading an article this morning about sort of the surprising traits of good leaders, and one of them was talking about a good leader treats everybody from the sort of janitor, it was an American article, to like the other CEO the same, and he used Barack Obama as an example of kind of wherever he was and whoever he was with, he treated everyone the same. And it just, I think if you're in this culture where you're striving to be better all the time and you're judging yourself for not being good enough, you naturally then you take that judgment to others, right?
Definitely.
And you start looking at those below you because they're not as good, they're not better. And then that's that hierarchical judging structure that then gets perpetuated in companies. So it just seems really unhelpful.
And it's reflected in going back to mental health again, because in Oxford, you know, I had tutors who were just, I cannot express, like frankly, I'm really pleased with how the debate about mental health has developed, because when I first got to Oxford, I started this initiative called Meeting of Minds, and that was opening up a space for kids to just talk about their mental well-being and actually get information from academics and celebrities. I don't think that would have been needed today, and that's great. But my tutors were just horrendous. And like I had, you know, I was thrown on, I think, 20 different types of medication like this, often cocktails. You're supposed to have a 4-month washout. And I was basically told, okay, well, if you don't get it together, we're just kicking you out. And it was this constant kind of threat. And so I'd be given 3 essays a week. I'm sorry if it sounds like poor little Oxford girl, but I think it's important, because if these kids are going to be the ones who call the shots later, we need to understand. So I had, 3 essays a week. If I missed an essay because I was ill, that would make it 4 essays for the next week because I had to catch up. And so I was on the amount of side effects it was horrendous. And unfortunately, because that is, these kids are really seeking approval from these tutors and these academics, and they're basically being told, pull yourself together. That's the prescription. Take whatever drug you have to get through. And because of that then translate in the workplace where you have an employee who's struggling mentally. You have that kind of ingrained trauma from being told your suffering isn't enough. It doesn't qualify you to have a day off. So you just throw that straight back and you go pull yourself together, or everyone's replaceable and you just fire the person.
One of the things I was really struck by working with different organisations was French-owned ones who'd taken over an English organisation. They would send their young, thrusting leaders over here. And their style of leadership, I'm going back a little while now, but I don't know whether it's changed or not, but their style of leadership was horrible. And it was very disrespectful and very autocratic. Right. And in exploring that, it seemed to go back to the universities in France, actually, where they were treated like dirt by their lecturers. And when you're in this intense incubator for 3, maybe 4 years, it really forms you. I mean, it's a very formative time of your life. And there's a kind of assumption that's how it is. And you said the fact that you had 2 very enlightened parents, different, but really encouraged you to be you and to express yourself in whatever way worked for you. That's amazing. And I think I'm quite sad in thinking that actually is quite rare.
Oh yeah, I mean, I can wax lyrical, because I think what made them so great was I'm not an easy kid, because like I'm outspoken, and I just have this fundamental hatred of stigma, because that to me is the most disruptive thing. We're never going to get anywhere if we can't talk about a subject. Like my parents their pride is contingent on not me making a certain amount of money. They want me to be safe. They want me to, be comfortable and not scared of paying bills or whatever. They want that, but that I'm incredibly blessed that I've had parents who, when I've fallen, have, and in spectacular ways, have made me believe in myself. Not just that it's going to be all right, but it's going to be formative in a way that you can really help others, and that's gotten me through some really tough stuff. So my parents are both these kind of beacons of enlightenment, but also just the best humans, and just the most liberal souls going. So I'm really blessed, and I hope that I hope that I nurture my relationships, if I'm an employer, kind of in that same supportive way, where ultimately progress isn't defined by suffering. It should never be. Success is never born out of suffering, because that's not real success. I think, at least.
It can inspire determination to get out or to do something different, and so on. But that's slightly different. But we talk about the university being a formative time. I think one of the interesting things, looking to the future and looking at how leaders are made, because I think that is the case, that there's two sort of elements before university. I mean, one is schools and education, and the other is parents. And I often think, as I look around at leaders today, the parents who, today's parents, most of them work, they're bringing up their kids in a particular way, which really is not setting them up to be different. Well, that's not quite true, is it? Because there's lots of difference in millennials, to sort of classify people in that way. You hear about latchkey kids and how they've grown up and they want to be different and so on. I think it's very difficult in the moment to say what difference things are going to make later on. But education, I think one of the greatest sins that the government commits right now is they pay the people who are so dedicated, who are teachers and nurses, nothing. And I think it's just so unbelievably disrespectful.
And it's a powerful message too, that helping others is valued less than helping yourself, fundamentally.
Yes, and that is all wrong. And it feels just so wrong. And so you've got education system which has got its hands tied behind its back, and you've got parents who don't have the time to parent, and they never had a model on how to parent.
Yeah.
So looking forward, it's like there's got to be a different way of helping people learn actually how to be good human beings, in a sense.
Yeah. Like particularly, I think parenthood has so many other stigmas attached too. Like mothers hating motherhood. That's something organisations like Peanut are doing good work, but ultimately we don't really talk about it. Fathers who have no idea what it means to be a father, because they're suddenly having these issues kind of brought to the fore about parental rights, and realising, okay, well, I then have a right to be as involved in the emotional upbringing and physical upbringing as my child, as my partner does. What does that mean? What is fatherhood? Is it different to motherhood? All these questions, which they haven't ever had a guide, because fathers have often been absentee. So there's stigma around talking about parenting, really, because we have these different manuals for different horses for courses. If you're going to be a very liberal parent or a very conservative parent, ultimately what it comes down to is instilling in your children, hopefully, a degree of moral compass and also this intrinsic worth. And I think that's what my parents were so good at, which was, it doesn't matter what you achieve, what you do, but it matters that you do it with passion, and it matters that you do it in a way that you pay forward the opportunities that you've had. And my parents would love me, I think, just as much as if I was Prime Minister or if I was an artist.
Which
genuinely,
you will be one day.
I think that would be hilarious. My concern is that fundamentally the way that good parenting is expressed today is not through that. It's not through this desire that your children can be good citizens. It's this desire that they are competitive. So even in utero, you've got these mothers thinking, what nursery is my child going to get to? And they're just on this conveyor belt to success and happiness and self-worth and love being contingent on a thing or an identity or an institution.
So I had a few questions then, that we've talked quite a lot about success. There were two words that I would really like to hear your kind of own personal definition of, and one of them is success. So how do you measure or see your own success, or what does success mean to you? And then the other one is confidence, because I've had a few conversations with people lately who have a strong dislike for this word confidence, because they associate it with arrogance or thinking that they're better than other people, and that makes me sad, because we should all feel confident in ourselves. So I just, really interested to see what your own personal sort of experiences and definitions of those two words were.
Well, neither of those concepts are zero sum, and unfortunately they're portrayed that way in media. That the famous quote is, there's only true success if someone else fails, like I'm paraphrasing, but it's that idea that we succeed and we are confident by overcoming or frankly suppressing someone else. And I've always found my confidence and my success amongst and not against others. I'm really firm on that. And but these concepts for me have both changed a lot as I've grown. And actually it's been, for both of those things, actually been through how my concept, nicely for this podcast, how the concept of leadership has changed for me. So I kind of bought into that paradigm growing up, as most kind of ambitious kids do, that success is something you achieve, you get out of achieving or securing your dreams or buying that thing, ultimately it's about money, or it's about prestige or influence or what have you. It's these transcendent concepts which normally can be quantified through pound notes. So I thought that my happiness would come from me just kind of, again, being really belligerent and stubborn and self-striving and self-serving, and I would secure both my confidence and happiness and success through the same thing, which is kind of material goods or possessions, or frankly having others respect me. I felt that my self-worth was reflected. So I sound like such an awful kid, but I think a lot of people still like this, and they're like this till they're dying that day. And that's the saddest thing, because the economic concept of diminishing return is really important in something like satisfaction, because we'll buy something and the more we buy, the less it actually has value to us, and we're never actually satiated or satisfied by anything that we buy. The way that success and happiness comes about is actually within the pursuit itself. It's not the pursuit of happiness. Happiness is the pursuit, or should be. So I now derive success from, and I hate using this Americanized word, but it's self-actualization. It's nothing makes me happier, nothing makes me feel more successful than when I'm using the skills that I have and the skills that make me feel authentic to myself on a platform where I can make a difference, and ultimately using the experience that I have to, in some way, hopefully diminish the suffering of others. But also, like, success for me is learning something new. Success is, I would say it's so immaterial now, whereas before it was so very material. And confidence, it's so important, you're right, that we stop conflating confidence with assertiveness. because assertiveness does not qualify expertise. Unfortunately, it's a heuristic for us in the boardroom now. The loudest voice in the room is the authoritative one. And that has to change, because that fundamentally means that we're making suboptimal decisions. If we're listening to the loudest person in the room, ordinarily the loudest person in the room is brash, hasn't really thought it through, and is just wanting to get ideas out there. So yeah, that's how I view it now, but it's taken a long time to get there. And it's fun. I'm lucky in that, yes, I've had a lot of brushes with kind of mental illness, depression, anxiety, but coming through that, it showed me, I think, where happiness is derived from, and the fact that this is all a false paradigm, and the point of diminishing return means what we really want we'll never get through this paradigm, through sex, shopping, drugs, alcohol. These things, these dopaminergic activities of choice, are just shortcuts to what we really want, but actually they're detours, because what we're really looking for is connection, purpose, and satisfaction. And those things can't be bought or used. They have to be found.
And so I suppose maybe one final question then is kind of what is your vision of a new type of leadership, or the leadership that you aspire to continue bringing to your work and to the people that you work with, and some of the values and qualities of that leadership?
I'm really excited by the concept of coordination, and I like that leadership is coordinating role, not just the first one who sticks their head above the parapet, or the person on the platform, or the person who's spouting hateful speech. Leadership to me is an organizational role, it's a managerial role, it's actually quite a bureaucratic role, but ultimately it's empowering others to be the best version of themselves. And it's leadership has to understand that if you bring ego to decision making, you are going to make subpar decisions, because we as humans have cognitive biases that we just can't really overcome until we have a delightful singularity which can do that for us, but unfortunately we don't yet. So I think what I would hope for leadership tomorrow is to understand that we need to change our goals, because a leader, can't lead unless there's a destination, right? So we need to change our destination, and that needs to be sustainability, that needs to be association-based economy rather than a growth-based economy. And it needs to be about meeting the greatest challenges we have ahead, without being afraid of change. And as I say, valuing the work of each individual component, because also the system's made up of people, right? So it's valuing each individual component and understanding how each individual component is as important in coordination as the coordinator.
So what's your message then? What's your message to the typical CEO today? What would you like him or her to think about to help them open up to this vision that you've got?
Remember who your boss is. Even if you're the CEO, remember who your boss is. And no, it's not your shareholders. It's actually your consumer. Or if you're a politician, it's your constituent. Ultimately, you are going to have... I'm a huge believer in a trickle-up economy, where if you invest in your workforce, first and foremost, you're going to get an incredible return out of it, much more so than if you think, if I just aggregate wealth, it'll trickle down eventually. That's nonsense. But it's so important that CEOs remember that when they reflect the population around them, and that's by diversifying leadership teams, that's by diversifying the workforce. So it's also about diversifying your products. We can look at pro-social examples of huge commercial success. That can be Rihanna's Fenty and Savage lines, which have marketed to everyone, all skin tones, all body types. And that has been a runaway money spinner, because these companies are now reflecting everyone and not just peddling this image of what people should be buying into. They're actually listening to their consumer. And by listening to your consumer's going to want to buy from you. If they feel if they feel respected and wanted within the decision process, and they're not just being unilaterally told what they should want, then wow, then you've got a real moneymaker. So for me, CEOs, I think, need to understand that their real boss is their buyer, and it's not just them calling the shots, because they're only going to last as long as their profit does, frankly. And that may be a very cynical and pragmatic approach to it, but I think it's important that CEOs realize that they aren't always the smartest guys in the room, and they can be incredibly out of date, and they need to be listening as much as they are talking, and that's either from their consumer or from the lower levels of their organization. If you make decision making bi-directional, it's going to be positive decision making. If you make it unilateral, you're going to make mistakes. With great challenge comes great opportunity, and let's be honest, climate change, inequality, poverty, pollution, all of these huge challenges are huge opportunities for the human race to show just what it's capable of. And I do have a very positive outlook, even though I'm a bit very doom and gloom, I'm sure, with this whole thing, but humans astound me. I am never surprised at how evil a person is capable of being, but I'm also never surprised at just how fundamentally, transcendently wonderful humans can also be. We have noble assets to our nature, and it's so important to shine a light on that. And part of that is coordination. No one leader can solve these problems. There's just no way. I mean, I wish there was an altruistic dictator out there who'd be like, all right, guys, climate change, let's do this. But really there's not. Everyone at the individual level is highly corruptible. But when you coordinate human nature and the nobler aspects of human nature to a superordinate goal, my God, the things you can achieve is just mind-blowing. So that's why I use the word coordinate, because I'm just so inspired by what we can do. The fact that, yes, the technology is available for us to actually solve these issues. I specialised in public health, and I was just blown away at how, disease, we have such a control over it. The issue is inequality in distributing cure. So we have the capacity to solve these issues. The problem is we're not being coordinated properly, and that's because our sense of direction is completely wrong.
Looking forward, and I love your positivity. I love your optimism.
So young, so idealistic. Talk to me in 50 years, if I'm alive, hopefully.
And you can only do these things one step at a time, and you will make your difference in your way, and each of us will make ours in our way, and hopefully there'll be ways in which we can work together, because it's when people come together with a vision that things actually do change, and that's what Serenity in Leadership is about. It's about taking a new sense of leadership, which is needed now, out to those who are receptive to it, and hopefully as time goes on there'll be more and more of those people who are receptive to it. So thank you for coming and joining us, and thank you for exploring some of your ideas and thoughts.
Yeah, I really need to get them down on paper at some point, but no, it's great to have platforms like this even exist, because it's something which can either endlessly depress you, the fact that changes aren't being made and we're still inspired by the same prototype leaders, or it can be something that really excites you, because fundamentally it's not working. The American dream isn't working. It can only last so long. So
it is a dream, that's the thing. There's no reality.
It's an inherited one, that's the point. Yeah. But no, I think platforms like this is great, because you'll have so many people where in their minds they've been, I need a place to call home. This is my belief, and they feel alienated by what they're told is success and what they're told is power. And so to have something like this, it's when people feel like, I'm not mad after all. So it's really important.
Thank you.